You already know what this video is going to be about, so let's just get right into it. There's quite a few reasons as to why dealerships, and not brand specific, it goes all around the board, whether it's BMW, Kawasaki, Harley Davidson, Yamaha, and everything in between. And I'll speak a little bit from my own experience of being a former mechanic at Harley, but there's quite a few reasons as to why dealers won't work on older motorcycles in the service department. The first reason is probably the most common one people will hear, especially as customers when talking to service advisors and service managers. And that's just that the parts are outdated, that they no longer make them, or obsolete. There are those cases where you can buy obsolete parts from aftermarket parts catalogs. However, a lot of times they are either back ordered, or they'll take a really long time to come in to the dealership, or just the price of them seems rather unreasonable for the customer to justify paying that amount for the obsolete part. But there's quite a few more reasons than just that alone. So I figured I would give you kind of all the reasons, but it all in the end sums up to one major one. Another big reason why dealers won't work on motorcycles past 10 to 20 years old is they are more prone to have broken parts, having rust and corrosion everywhere. For example, some bikes, to just purely change the rear wheel, you have to take off the exhaust. And if that rear wheel has sat there in the rain for many years, and then after 15 years the owner wants to bring it back to life, you might have to take the exhaust off. In some cases, you have to do that. And the studs holding the exhaust, they can be in really bad condition where they can easily break off. And that simple job can turn into a much bigger job. And that's a small example. There are so many examples where just this concept of rusted up parts, a small fix becoming a much bigger one due to something else breaking. And on top of that, being an older bike, it's more prone to having many issues. So it'll come in, get one thing fixed, and then 2 weeks down the road, something else goes wrong. It's quite easy for the customer to blame the dealership that something went wrong when it's just an old bike, and that part, whatever failed, was just bound to happen, and happen in the time frame of it leaving the dealership or just shortly afterwards. So it makes the dealership look bad when in reality, you just have an old bike that has quite a few things wrong with it. In a way, it's kind of just saving one's own back. To avoid potential problems, it's easier to just turn away from it and not even allow it through the door before a small fire becomes into a wildfire. Another point to add on to that as well, besides just, the dealers looking out for their own back, this situation, if it were to arise where the customer got something fixed and then shortly later down the road something else went wrong, it just creates a customer dissatisfaction. And I hate to say this because I know a majority of y'all are on the more customer side versus actually being technicians. And from my experience, it is quite frequent where a customer doesn't want to believe what the dealer is telling them because they feel like the dealer is out to get them and get more money out of them. So if the dealer says, hey, look, that part was already bad, we tried to warn you then, but you didn't fix it, or whatever it could be, it's easy for the customer to believe that just the service department is lying and trying to save face, when in reality, they were just being upfront or truthful, or they didn't notice it at that time since they were working on something completely different. And hence with time, 2 weeks goes by and then something else fails. To just avoid potential drama, it's just easier not to even stir the pot or go in that direction, if you know what I mean. Another reason why dealers won't accept older bikes, this reason they probably don't want to admit because it will make the dealers look bad, but it is more truth than untruthful in many cases, but it's the lack of training and outdated training on the techs they have. I've covered this before in another video, feel free to watch it after this, but I covered the topic of dealerships hiring under-trained technicians, whether it's for to be able to pay them lower, whatever the reason might be, dealerships often have not the most, maybe, trying to find a right way to word it, but technicians who are well versed in motorcycles of all models, or just the theory of how motorcycle engines work, how transmission works, electrical components, and all of that. A lot of technicians more just know how to fix something because they've already done it, so they're just repeating the moves rather than actually understanding what they're doing and the theory behind it. And with time, as the older generations of mechanics are retiring and they're hiring new ones who were trained under new motorcycle models while they were at school, a lot of them lack the understanding of more outdated technologies. And I hate to use the word outdated, but I'm just trying to be upfront. You know, most bikes now are fuel injected. Pretty much all bikes are fuel injected now. So a lot of techs don't even know how to work on a carburetor. And the biggest example I can give to this is in my last dealership. As great as I will speak about that whole experience, I know that when I was working with a carburetor, I had to ask the person working in the parts department, older gentleman, very smart gentleman, but he was not a mechanic, but he knew how to work on carburetors, so he would help me how to tune them and make sure I had the float set correctly and whatnot, and just verify my work that I had, you know, the carburetor was tuned properly with the bike, because none of the other techs knew how to do it, or I don't know if there was an intimidation or what, but I just know if I had questions, they weren't able to give me a direct answer besides go get that gentleman working in the parts department. And no shame to them at all. Absolutely phenomenal mechanics. What I'm getting to is dealerships may not have as much expertise working on older model motorcycles, and to avoid having improper repairs done, they just rather not touch those motorcycles at all. While I'm on the topic of just the lack of expertise, another reason is just the diagnostic tools. A lot of techs rely on the computer diagnostics that they have in dealerships rather than, like I said before, of really understanding the theory of how something works, kind of putting the puzzle piece together in their head, if you know what I'm trying to get at. And older bikes are not really all that compatible with the newer diagnostic computers they have, where you actually have to think a little bit and understand the process of how the components work to be able to know how to fix them. Rather, a newer motorcycle where you can just plug it into the computer and it'll tell you a code and kind of already right off the bat leads you in the direction of what you need to work on. Those diagnostic computers are not always correct, but they do give you a much bigger head start compared to working on older bikes. With this last reason, I'm gonna also state, I do believe dealerships will not admit to it. It's just profit margins. It's not as profitable as working on newer bikes. Working on older bikes, one, takes up so much more time, backs up the schedule, then being more complex, diagnostics taking a longer time, on top of the potential of lack expertise. All these factors, and aside, you know, if something breaks, just being more careful with the rust and corrosion or fighting tough bolts that are just rusted on and corroded on, whatever it might be. There's so many factors that make working on older bikes more time consuming. And that aside, just the price of it as well. Working on a older bike is going to be more expensive for the customer, where in a lot of cases the repair will actually cost more than the bike what it's worth. Now, that should be a topic of, well, that's the customer's decision if they want to pay for a repair that's cost more than the value of their bike. That shouldn't be under the judgment of the dealership. However, people tend to forget dealerships are not here to be here and do good for the greater good. They are here to make a profit. They are not here to scratch your back. They will scratch your back if it means they get their back scratched double the amount. Yes, they're there when we need help. We pay money, they fix our issues. They kind of, you know, it's a win-win situation. We get our situation fixed, they make some money. But in the end, that's all it's about, is them making their profit. And the newer bikes, the amount of time it takes to work on one older bike, they could have serviced quite a few new bikes and make much more profit in that time span. So on the behalf of dealerships and just the whole topic of profit margins, it is understandable. As a customer, yes, this can be very frustrating, because why would you consider buying a motorcycle from them that's used when they won't even work on it potentially? So I can get the frustrations on the customer behalf. With all this said, I do want to let y'all know there are some amazing independent motorcycle shops out there. Not all of them. Look at reviews, because you know people will leave a bad review more often than a good one. But if you find places with a lot of raving good reviews, you've got to imagine what type of service is being done for people to be motivated and compelled to leave a good review, when it's actually quite rare for people to do so when there's a higher chance of bad reviews to be done. Don't be scared to trust an independent dealer or independent shop. And a lot of people who own independent shops at one point worked at dealerships but left due to maybe wanting to get paid more or just don't like the way dealerships run things. And in that other video, I have mentioned some grimy things dealerships do and that kind of push techs to leave out of that business. I'm not here just to talk smack about dealers, but I've seen this question in my comment section before, and I know it's kind of a big topic because when I worked at the dealership, I know we've turned away a lot of bikes and some people were frustrated due to this, but I just figured I would make a video, open the discussion in the comments below for y'all to talk about y'all's experience. I am always all for that. I love when, you know, y'all just leave y'all's opinions and experiences in the comments below on the topics that we cover. But with that said, if you have any suggestions on future videos, feel free to put them in the comments below. Y'all have a great day. Stay safe out on the road. But most of all, don't forget to spread love to those around you.